Alone Season 4, Episode 9, Recap. It starts out on day 40 and it ends on day 49. What we have here, though, is three groups remaining, and they're all in pretty bad condition. They're all very nutrient deprived, they're nutrient deficient. They're all struggling with the temperature, which now is getting very cold. It's like in the 20s during the day now in Vancouver Island. And on top of that, they just have to deal with all the side effects of not having enough calories. And all of the energy levels are at pretty much rock bottom so far for the show. So of the three teams, we have Brooke and Dave, we have Ted and Jim, and we also have Pete and Sam. And Brooke and Dave, they build a crab trap. They get some snails, but it's not it's not sufficient. And they agree. They just don't know what to do. They push on for a little while, and then they hit a wall. And I think it mainly is because of Brooke's body fat content is so low. She has no more reserves really left, and she just has no more energy. And so they go ahead and tap out on day 49. Ted and Jim, they're getting along a little bit better, but if you ask me, I think it's just because they don't have the energy to bicker back and forth. And so they're kind of being forced in some way to work together. And they're also possibly realizing that it doesn't work to their advantage to have a lot of tension. You know, they have different ideas of what they need to do. One believes that they need to forage more, and the other believes that fishing could pay off more. And so what happened, though, is that they did catch a fish. It was kind of like at least a partially rotten fish in a net. And what we have is they eat this fish, and Ted gets worse in terms of how he feels. He was not already feeling very well, but he definitely doesn't feel good at all now. A lot of abdominal pain, cramps, things like that. And so on day 47, they were contemplating to go ahead and tap out, or at least they were talking about it, and they didn't do it. And to my surprise, because there's always twists and turns in this show, it was actually Brooke and Dave. Now, I assume that anyone could tap out at any time at this point because, man, we're getting close to 50 days. That's a lot of time in this environment with very little resources. And so it's not a surprise if anybody leaves. But I will say, though, that sometimes you almost expect certain people to tap next and they don't, which is kind of the element of surprise, which I kind of like that in the show. Lastly, though, we could talk about Pete and Sam. They're insulating their shelter at the beginning of the episode. Pete is getting more irritable, and he's getting a little bit more confused over time. They say in the show that maybe it's his glucose levels are low, and but he thinks he says one thing when he says another, and so he's getting a little bit confused, which is a symptom of being, lack of nutrition and calories in particular. I mean, he's starving to death, the poor guy, I think that if you looked at all the seasons and you simply tried to estimate, which is not really possible to do, but just generally speaking, you can see how impressive it is for someone in their 60s to last, and he's still going, he hasn't tapped out yet, Pete and Sam are full on going here, but they're on day 49, at the end of this particular episode 9, to last about 50 days and still going is very impressive, I have to say. I think that, Pete is probably one of the more stronger people, even if it's not physically, and I think he is strong physically, but even if it's just more of a mental thing, I think that he probably is one of the top people, contenders for that position. If you were just to rank them, and I'm not sure how you would do that, but just by looking at what we can see from the episodes in the previous seasons, Pete has a lot of inner strength. So once again, it ends on day 49. We got two teams left. it could be anyone's guess, because once again, we got Ted, which is having a lot of abdominal pain and cramping, and he's just completely wiped out. And then on the other side, we have Pete, which is really showing very low glucose levels, and he's really starting to really feel the effects with his moodiness. Of course, they all have moodiness, and they've all pretty much have shown that so far through the season. But when you get to the point that you're starting to get confused, that's a whole nother level. So what can we learn? Well, when it's freezing cold and you're starving, you don't do well in terms of thinking through your problems and trying to solve problems. You get depressed. You kind of get real negative. We've seen this multiple times in the season. A lot of negativity. A lot of it's just venting. And if you follow control theory, you'll know that a lot of times people are trying to gain control over their environment by imposing their will over how they behave and think, and even over their emotions. So, for example, if they can't control the situation like they can't, and they can't ever feel like they're full and they're always hungry, or they're always cold and they can't get warm, then as a mechanism to gain control, a lot of people depress, or they get down on themselves. Sometimes they get angry, sometimes people withdraw, and we see that, Sometimes we see people on this show lash out at each other. They have short tempers. Sometimes they depress a bit, and they just kind of, they don't say much, or they just kind of withdraw with each other. And these are all natural ways. Maybe not the best by any means in terms of the most efficient way to solve a problem, but it is for them the best way that they know to gain more control over their situation. Since their situation is beyond their control, all they can control is themselves. So it's just something to consider when you watch these types of shows like Alone, that when people are completely helpless, they'll look to themselves to find a little bit of predictability and control over their situation. Because if that's all that you can control is yourself, then that's what you'll actually refer to for that need to be satisfied. So with that, if you got any thoughts on Season 4, Episode 9, any other observations, feel free to leave it in the comment section. Just want to thank everyone for your support. A lot of people watching the channel now, getting a lot of new subscribers. I know there's a lot of haters out there. I'm not really sure exactly why you'd want to waste your time leaving a lot of nasty comments on the channel. I don't attack anyone personally. I'm just making comments and thoughts. I just share things. And, if you have nothing else better to do to be negative, man, then, what does that say about you, man? That's pretty bad. So I just really do appreciate all the positive people and people that actually go out of their way to say, hey, thanks for spending a few minutes here to make the video, versus those who just say this is complete crap. Not everyone is into these kind of shows. I totally agree. If you're not, then don't watch the video. There's a lot of people who don't have a chance to actually watch the actual seasonal episode, so they sometimes look for videos as a recap. And so that's all that some of these are. And so, I wish all the contestants the very best. Hopefully there's no problems. There's no problems that with anyone's long-term health from doing this game. I know that for some people in the past seasons, there's been some struggles to get back to 100% health. And I just hope there's no long-term issues or implications for being exposed to the weather and from not eating, for such a long period of time. As always, thanks for your ongoing support. You guys take care.